A child's earliest years, from the moment of birth to the age of 5, are crucial for their healthy development and success later in life. Indeed, by the age of 5, 90% of a child's brain is developed. For young children, falling behind at this stage often means getting left behind forever. This is even truer for children from the poorest families and born with disabilities and developmental delays who face even more hardships and are held at the starting line. Inclusive early childhood development services focused on providing nurturing care as early as possible to vulnerable children and their families can transform lives. When you change the beginning, you can change the whole story. This is Simra. She's 3 and still hasn't said her first word. Early identification of a child's needs enables the provision of timely nurturing care. This includes good health and adequate nutrition, including good medical care and rehabilitation services. Responsive caregiving, giving parents the tools to respond to their child's needs in a loving and supportive manner. Crucial safety and protection, and opportunities to learn through play. The greatest gains can be made by targeting the most disadvantaged children. Invest in inclusive early childhood development. Leave no child behind.
The Leave No Child Behind, Invest by Light for the World, was generously funded and supported by the Early Childhood Program of the Open Society Foundations.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Jennifer Rigg. I serve as the Executive Director at the Global Campaign for Education US, and it is my honor to welcome you to the Leave No Child Behind, Invest in the Early Years Global Report launch today. We are pleased to welcome people from around the globe for today's session, which kicks off a series of events about the Leave No Child Behind, Invest in the Early Years Global Report and case studies. We would especially like to thank the Open Society Foundation's Early Childhood Program, Light for the World, ECDAN, IDDC, the Global Campaign for Education, IDA, GCE US colleagues, and everyone who has made this report and today's event possible. The full report acknowledgements begin on page 2, and we will include that link where you can see that full report being launched today in the chat box. I would especially like to thank Joe Walker, Nafisa Babu, Dr. Joan Lombardi, Dr. Tom Sabella, Salam Germel, and everybody who has worked so hard behind the scenes to make this possible. Quickly, we'd like to provide an overview of accessibility tools that we will be using today. During the event, please use the chat box to communicate with the event organizers, and we will use the chat box to share announcements and key information throughout the event. The event will be led in English. To access audio interpretation in your Zoom controls, click on Interpretation. For me, that's showing up at the bottom of my screen, but it might look different for you depending on the type of Zoom that you're using. Then click on the language you want to hear. And for colleagues, you should be able to select Portuguese. We know that that line is working, and we're just working out a technical glitch to make sure that the French will also be available. For international sign interpretation during this event, please see the active interpreters video in Zoom. When slides are showing, you can select view options, then side-by-side mode to ensure that the international sign interpreters video remains highlighted. You can also enlarge the international sign interpreters window by clicking and dragging the bottom corner of the window to your preferred size. For closed captioning or CART, click on the closed caption in the meeting controls. And again, I see that at the bottom of my screen on Zoom, but just let us know in the chat by responding to panelists if you need any help. That will allow you to start viewing closed captioning. To adjust the caption size, click the upward arrow next to closed caption, select settings, then adjust the text size to your comfort. If you would prefer to access closed captioning on a separate screen, please see the link to stream text in the chat box. You can also use this feature to receive a transcript for the full event. Please join in on social media throughout today's event at #InclusiveECD4All. You can learn more about today's speakers at the links shared in the chat box. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Dragana Sretanov, Senior Team Manager, Early Childhood Program with Open Society Foundations in London. Dragana, thank you for your leadership, and over to you.
Thank you, Jennifer. It is my pleasure to welcome you all on behalf of the Early Childhood Program of Open Society Foundations. I'm delighted to be here today to mark the launch of the Leave No Child Behind Investing Early Years report that looks into equitable financing at the early childhood development level. This report is incredibly important and provides us with a much needed snapshot into the financing and implementation of inclusive early childhood development by 10 donors, scans case studies across 4 countries in sub-Saharan Africa, and shows severe gaps in services and funding. Open Society Foundation support the early childhood development sector over the period of the last 25 years, emphasizes the idea that building democratic open societies requires supportive national and global ecosystems that operate effectively at the grassroots levels. These systems needed to ensure every young child is included from the start in services designed for all children that can fulfill their rights to belong to family and communities so they can develop to their fullest potential. We see the roles of the governments, donors, international organizations, professionals, civil society organizations, parents, and communities in creating more equitable societies, policies, and systems needed to support young children. Starting with our flagship step-by-step program in 1994, which transformed communist early education systems and engaged with the governments across 30 countries, the program evolved into 2 distinct streams. The first focused on improving equity and social inclusion for young children facing systemic discrimination, prejudice, and exclusion. The second aimed to build the civil society structures at regional and global level and structures and mechanisms needed to support further growth of the emerging childhood field. The Open Society Foundation's engagement in the early 90s in promoting the importance of holistic early childhood development and the support to parents and caregivers nurturing skills was a bold and I would say quite innovative approach in the region at that time. This work was the beginning of Open Society Foundation's legacy in early childhood system building, in addressing children who were excluded, and in promoting the science behind the brain research that recognizes the importance of early learning and the critical timing for supporting it. One component of our current work focused on inclusion and disability engages directly with select global advocacy opportunities, and together with civil society partners seeks to sustain visibility for early childhood intervention and inclusive education agendas by donors and governments. This work also aims to increase focus on public financing and inclusive education for early years at the country and global level. Despite significant gains made in promoting inclusive education globally, young children with disabilities and those belonging to marginalized groups need more support to achieve universal access to inclusive education. Few international organizations focus on young children at risk, tending to support inclusive education reforms, starting with compulsory primary education. We believe to be most effective, inclusion in education must begin in early childhood, which is the most rapid phase of child's development. Inequalities in learning and other child development outcomes emerge before primary education, and by the time children reach schools, achievement gaps are firmly present and are often very difficult to readdress. Evidence shows that inclusion in quality early childhood development can compensate for the disadvantages from and enables young children to have an equally strong start in life, as their more advantaged peers. Actions we believe are also required for supporting parents and civil society organizations to network and demand better data and systems, improve government accountability, and environment where constructive engagement between parents, professionals, and policymakers is a common practice. Early childhood program's contribution to identification of the gaps in the research and global knowledge for building the case for early years inclusion has resulted in several publications that supported our civil society partners with robust evidence on the issues of relevancy to their own agendas. The policy research report that we are launching today is an example of an amazing collaboration efforts between multiple partners, supported by Open Society Foundation, aimed to move inclusive education agenda, starting with the young children to more solid ground. We are hoping that this report will lead to concrete actions that will bring about lasting changes to early inclusive opportunities for the marginalized children and their families long after this EC closure is planned for by the end of this year. On this note, it is my huge pleasure to introduce Nafisa Babu. Nafisa is Director of Inclusive Education for Light for the World. She serves as the chair of the International Disability and Development Consortium, Inclusive Education Task Group, and a board member of the Global Campaign for Education. Nafisa was a driving force and a co-author of the report we are launching today, and she will take us through the key report findings and recommendations. Nafisa, over to you.
Thank you, Jagana. You know, it is Nelson Mandela who said, "Our children are the rock on which our future will be built, our greatest asset as a nation. They will be the leaders of our country, the creators of our national wealth, who care for and protect our people." And I think this is really important things to bear in mind. This is true for all children, but sadly, those expectations are not naturally bestowed on a child with a disability or one with a developmental delay. But I and Jennifer know firsthand the life transformative effects of good early child development and good nurturing care. That really saddens me immensely when we travel, or when I travel to our countries in sub-Saharan Africa and meet girls and boys whose lives could have been so much more different if they received that good early childhood intervention services. So the research I'm presenting today makes the case for increasing investment in inclusive early childhood development services for the most vulnerable, whose challenges and multiple disadvantages have become even more pronounced because of the COVID pandemic. So even though the research on this report was completed before the pandemic, it's still the fundamental message still runs true. Urgent investment in inclusive early childhood development is the most effective way to reach those left furthest behind, and is even more apt than ever before. So I see the slides are not yet up, but I'm sure it will come up in a moment. So 43%, about 250 million of children under the age of 5, that means every second child of this age in low and middle income countries are at risk of not reaching their full developmental potential. And this forecast is even grimmer as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this failure to invest in early child development threatens to squander the development potential of our future generation and keep regions such as sub-Saharan Africa in the grips of poverty and the violation of the rights of the child. You know, this is even more concerning considering that there's been a 70% rise in childhood disability in Africa. And that is as a result of the decline in childhood mortality, but also because of the lack of attention to services for survivors of child mortality. So foundational to achieving our SDGs and the segue to accessing all rights is early childhood development. And the Lancet series has also presented irrefutable evidence of the economic returns and investment in ECD for countries. While at an individual level, adults affected by adversity who receive good early childhood development services are estimated to earn almost a third more than peers who have not in their country. So for children at risk of developmental delays or disabilities, early child interventions such as screening for impairments or providing parents with good guidance and help their child develop will make a huge difference in their lives. But these services should really be, and these services can form the bridge to inclusive education and their success in later life. But what to do, be able to achieve that, we really need to do a twin track approach to providing access to all and then also the specialized services. You know, world leaders had spoken about the importance of early childhood development. And we wanted to really look into, you know, how can we make sure that these investments, these commitments actually translate into adequate proper investments. And this is why we did the study and looked at 10 of the most influential donors in the sector in terms of size that they provide, in terms of funding, and also influence to early childhood development services. And then, so after looking at tracking their investment levels to early childhood development, we also then went back into recipient country level and looked into 4 countries, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Burkina Faso, to see what has exactly happened to the money, the funds that had been provided, what are the real challenges in scaling up early childhood development in those countries. And their experiences can really be, it could provide a good learning for the rest of the continent. Just to say, it was quite challenging, a challenging task, because there's no real agreed upon method to analyze spending on early childhood development or isolating spending on marginalized groups, as a OECD DAC database on disability is only voluntarily reported against. So this brought us actually to our first policy recommendation, and that given this importance of early childhood development, we really see that it is important to develop an agreed upon approach to calculate spending on early childhood developments. So governments need to track, so we can track government spending and hold them accountable. So broadly, here are some of the 3 key messages for this report. You know, ECD is massively underfunded despite verbal commitments and overwhelming evidence of its transformative power. Vulnerable children, those who need it the most, children at risk of developmental delays with disabilities and development delays are not generally considered, and investment levels are nowhere near of what is required for integrated, that means across sectors, inclusive early childhood development for all, basically ensuring that children don't just survive, but actually thrive. So we looked at some, just to give you a bit of a snapshot of, just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the countries, of the investment levels. Of the 9 donors, they collectively spend around 7% on early childhood development. And this amount really drops down to a mere 3% when you exclude UNICEF, which is obviously, UNICEF is a massive supporter of children, and their mandate is around supporting children, young children and their families. Countries like Germany and France spend below 1%, well below 1%, and the EU is just hovering around that level. So there's really not enough investment. And the development assistance policies across the board really lack a commitment to disability inclusive programming and an integrated approach, except for UNICEF and the World Bank, however. When it comes to pre-primary education, even though we know that it is we are about 10 years to go to SDG, to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, and the recommended spending level is 10%, we are still lagging quite behind. UNICEF is providing about 8.3% of the GPE, but 5% of the aid towards pre-primary, but the levels is alarmingly low. And most donors are spending less than 1% of the ODA on pre-primary. On the recipient country level, what we really noticed is that health investment was far more pronounced, targeting more disease control and not so much on nutrition, and pre-primary levels were excessively low. There's also quite a big misunderstanding of what early childhood development was. It was most understood as just pre-primary education. So it's not surprisingly that interventions like early childhood interventions for children under 3 to be able to identify and support them at that very young age are often neglected. So What we also noticed that, which I thought was also quite shocking, in countries such as Mozambique, you can also see the regression that even the investment in pre-primary has actually declined over the years. And this is really, really worrying and if we're looking into the future. Because what we really need to do is quadruple the investment by donors and governments to about 44 million US dollars per year to achieve SDG target 4.2. So let me go through to some of our main 5 policy recommendations. That's the picture of the regression in pre-primary. So we need to have more and focus. We need to invest more and also focus on calculating the actual funding gap at a country level. This is really important as we move forward and look at what is really needed to invest to make sure that we also invest in the development of the workforce for early childhood development. As mentioned before, we also need to determine a proper methodology to track ODA spending on early childhood development and isolate funding actually towards children with disabilities and other marginalized groups. We also need to increase our investment in donors need to increase their investment in early childhood intervention. That means for programs, parenting programs, support programs for children under the age of 3, because we are finding these children way too late. And we also need to make sure that we hardwire inclusion of children with disabilities from the outset, not just them, but all other marginalized children. And we also really need one donor to step up and say, we are prioritizing early childhood development and not just globally, but also in countries, because this is such a worthwhile investment. On country level, what we did notice is that it's often not a good framework for investment in an integrated services for early childhood development. So we need more coherent strategies that donors can then invest in. And thus multi-sectoral collaboration is not really, is quite complex. And for that reason, we really need to look at pre-existing, well-functioning donor mechanisms to be able to kind of facilitate that collaboration. We also see that it's really important that, particularly now when we are facing austerity measures and funding constraints, that we really need to make sure that donors also help, that there's more domestic funding available for early childhood development services. And that can only be happening by progressive taxation. And now we also know that our debt cancellation is also plays an important role in freeing up funding for early childhood development.
Ok, estou testando para ver se você pode me escutar agora.
So, therefore, when we look at all these different issues, what we really need to know is, what we really need to ask for is that governments prioritize the inclusion of children with disabilities, but also all marginalized children and also early childhood developments and early childhood development services, because this is so important, not just now, but also in the recovery of COVID-19. And we need to therefore maintain or boost investments to support children's health, physical, cognitive, social, and emotional development, particularly for the most vulnerable, as I mentioned, by putting equity and inclusion in the forefront and leaving no child behind. So as we start this discussion, like Jennifer said, this is a dialogue and we want to keep the conversation going. We really need you to amplify this message and call on world leaders to increase investment in inclusive early child development. So please sign the petition by Global Citizen. There's the QR code on the slide. And we'd also like to hear your view. In your view, which report recommendation do you see as most important? So there will be a poll will be coming up. Salam. And so there are the poll questions. The translation of the poll is in the chat. So the first recommendation, should we focus on calculating the real funding gaps on country level? Is the agreed methodology the most important recommendation for you? Increase in investment in early childhood intervention and parenting programs, hardwiring inclusion, empowering civil society. And I think this is really crucial because many parents and families don't really know the amazing transformative power of early childhood development. or committing 10% of education aid to inclusive pre-primary. So those are the different recommendations, and we are dying to hear from you. Which ones do you think are most important? And as we move on to our leadership roundtable and hear from them.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Nafisa.
you.
Thank you to everybody for joining in the poll. We are so grateful, and please join me, all of us, in thanking Nafisa as well for her leadership on this report and for this great advocacy and campaigning. We will share in the chat box ways that you can all join that petition, and we'll talk more later about that call to action. But please do sign the petition if you haven't already and share it across your networks. We will now discuss these issues and solutions in a leaders roundtable discussion. First, we'll hear from Dr. Mano Santaninas, Director of the Global Education Monitoring, or GEM report. The GEM report's Scoping Progress in Education, or SCOPE webpage, reveals pre-primary attendance is low for many low and lower middle income countries, yet a few, such as Nepal, Ghana, and Vietnam, show very good attendance figures. What can be done to ensure that other low-income countries reach similar levels to those countries and improve the chance of achieving SDG 4.2 on pre-primary education?
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you very much for the invitation. It is a great honor to be with you, and congratulations on the launch of this report. I'm sure you brought me here over as the numbers person, and it's true, SCOPE is a great resource. I wish I could show it to you, but you can visit it at the education-progress.org website. And there, if we could go a bit deeper and start making the comparisons that SCOPE allows you to do, what you would see is it's not always what it seems. It's good to go through the data. For example, taking the comparison between Nepal and Pakistan, the difference is not so great when it comes to early childhood education. It is mainly down to the fact that Nepal has made great efforts in expanding access to education more generally. The difference is much clearer when you compare Ghana with Cote d'Ivoire, for instance. Ghana has made really huge steps forward compared to its neighbor. But it is also the case that many children in Ghana remain in preschool over age, which is not desirable. Taking Vietnam as a third example, Vietnam has long achieved universal access to preschool education. An interesting example to compare it with is Laos, a neighboring country that is making recently huge progress. So it is clear, and your message in this report is absolutely fundamental. Commitment is a prerequisite. The need that there is a plan, that there are targets, that there are resources, all these are extremely important aspects. But I'm going to shift your attention from quantity to quality, and I trust this is in line with the nurturing care framework that you're championing. Sometimes it's not just about the supply, but it's also about demand, winning over parents and convincing them that there is a service of good quality waiting for their children. Now, a common way many of these countries have succeeded in expanding pre-primary education is attaching preschool classrooms to existing primary schools. Governments have converted some classrooms into preschool playrooms in rural areas, or they have assigned one teacher in each government primary school to teach a new pre-primary class. This approach has advantages because it makes more efficient use of existing facilities and administrative support. It can also foster continuity for school children and make it possible for older siblings to take their younger siblings to preschool. But where preschools and primary schools use the same facilities, there is a danger. And that we should remember that preschool children will be taught using primary school approaches for which they're not developmentally ready in terms of pupil-teacher ratios, classroom organization, curriculum, teaching methods. So it is very important to make sure that a more appropriate approach is used for these reception classes when we choose this effective from a financial perspective approach. Because preschools need to be financed and staffed differently, even if they are based in primary schools. You won't be surprised to hear me saying that given the theme of the 2020 Global Education Monitoring Report, early childhood education needs to be inclusive. Even if services are accessible, their quality largely determines whether they contribute to inclusion. So I'm going to close with three broad dimensions of quality related to inclusion that are worth mentioning, and it's important as we expand our systems. First, all modalities need to be based on interaction. Inclusive early childhood education programs have had active participation as their overarching objective to ensure children learn, but also develop a sense of belonging. So positive interactions are needed with the adults, with peers, with parental involvement. These are all essential components. Secondly, efficiency based on integrating services is very important. Lack of understanding of the holistic nature of early childhood services can hinder inclusion, as does absence of coordination between health, nutrition, and education providers. Many lessons can be drawn in service integration from Latin America. And third and final, child-centered curriculum based on play is fundamental. Shifting from teaching strategies that risk not engaging children to those that are better aligned with their interests is also key to building inclusive learning. Learning through play can help develop skills and capabilities, improve the interactions that I was referring to, and foster cooperation. In the new year, we're going to be launching a policy paper that will develop these ideas further on inclusive early childhood education. Thank you very much for the invitation, and congratulations once again on the launch of the report.
Thank you so much, Manos, and thanks to your entire team for the great work that you do. Next, we'll hear from Dr. Bolajoko Olosanya, Director of the Center for Healthy Start Initiative in Nigeria. UN data indicates less than 70% of young children are developmentally on track in health, learning, and psychosocial well-being in many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Please paint a picture of the need within sub-Saharan Africa to build inclusive ECD services. What needs to be done? Bola, let's just make sure that we can ensure that your sound is working for everyone. Thank you to colleagues for your patience. Of course, we tested all of this multiple times, which is the way in the Zoom world that we're in at the moment. What we will do is make sure to share with everybody the important work that Dr. Olosanya is doing, with apologies that I know she was having some difficulty with her audio just now. So I'm very sorry if it is not coming through for people. Yeah, she is, unfortunately, she is not muted actually. I think she's just having some problems with audio on her end. So we will come back to her if we can, and we'll work with her directly to troubleshoot. Next, we'll go directly to welcome Dr. Hannah Brixey, manager of the World Bank Human Capital Project, which launched in 2018. Please tell us how you see investment in ECD, and in particular inclusive ECD, in the context of the Human Capital Project.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and congratulations on the launch of this magnificent report. I'm delighted to share with you insights from the Human Capital Project. The Human Capital Project is a global effort to protect and invest in people. And early child development is at the core of the Human Capital Project. Because as we know, investing in the early years is the foundation for human capital. An inclusive and quality early child program help children develop the cognitive and social emotional skills that they need to succeed in school and in life. And this is especially true for the most disadvantaged children. As measured by the Human Capital Index, a child born today may achieve only about 56% of her productive potential. And in many developing countries, this fraction is even lower. So let me share with you how the Human Capital Project is promoting inclusive early child development and education. So first, inclusive early child development. So the World Bank Group's investments in inclusive early child development are increasing. They are reaching nearly 4.5 billion in 2020. And this is more than double the amount just 2 years ago. we are working closely with clients and partners and are investing across sectors to promote children's holistic development. An increasing share of these investments come in the form of so-called development policy operations. And these operations serve to advance coordinated institutional and policy reforms across sectors. So to give you an example, in Peru, such an operation is helping the government to realize a vision where every child arrives at school ready to learn, having benefited from inclusive and high quality early child development and social assistance. A significant support is also in the form of capacity building and knowledge, with a strong emphasis on quality to ensure that programs deliver results for all young children. Now, second, inclusive early child education. So the World Bank has nearly tripled its investment in early child education in the last 10 years. And currently it's the largest international funder of early child education, with a current portfolio of over $1.5 billion across 44 countries. And as an example, in Senegal, we are working with the government to build an integrated approach to support young children and their families. The project is expected to improve child nutrition and promote early stimulation by integrating community-based services. It is scaling up early learning in formal preschools and also in community-based preschools in partnership with Quranic schools and parent-teacher associations. And it also works to enhance child protection and the early childhood system by registering all child births. And third, inclusive education. The World Bank is committed to ensuring equity and broader inclusion in education. So as part of its commitments on disability inclusive development, the bank is ensuring that all its education projects will be disability inclusive by 2025. And this is aligned with the World Bank's environmental and social framework and the current IDA 19 commitments. So within IDA 19, disability is one of the cross-cutting themes, and it is an effort to promote a mind shift and ensure that inclusive education is part of our core efforts and not just on the margins. And finally, in response to COVID-19 pandemic, the World Bank is working closely with countries to mitigate the negative impacts, and we are prioritizing inclusive programs to protect and invest in all children, including programs for inclusive child development, learning, nutrition, water and sanitation, health, psychosocial services, and so on. And you can see it in our report called Protecting People and Economies, which shows how protection of children and investments in all children can be anchored at the core of the overall policy effort in response to the pandemic. And in supporting countries, the bank is using and promoting both old and new technologies to improve service delivery, such as providing multimodal learning and outreach through the internet and radio to reach parents of all children. An effort also, which is for the way forward, to build back better, to build back better inclusive services for all children. So to conclude, let me reemphasize that the Human Capital Project is promoting investments in resilient and inclusive early child development, education, and other essential services for all children so that they reach their full potential. And we appreciate the excellent partnerships with many of you here today. Thank you, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the entire World Bank team. We are so grateful for your work and look forward to speeding up that process of reaching that commitment well before 2025. It's so critical for children around the world. And now I'm delighted that we can go directly to Dr. Bolojoko Olusanya, who was previously introduced. So let's go straight to you to make sure that the audio will work. Can you hear us?
Yes, I want to thank Nafisa and the organizers for this invitation. As an adult with disability from birth, it is impossible for me to describe the future that awaits children with disabilities in sub-Saharan Africa in 4 minutes, but I will touch on a few things. Firstly, global unintended consequence of the successful survival strategy of saving every child at birth during the MDG era accounts for the rising population of survivors with developmental disabilities. This includes families struggling to survive without state welfare programs. Secondly, the societal attitude towards disability from superstitious beliefs of retribution for wrongdoing and or offense to deity leads to stigmatization and social exclusion of affected families. This may lead to family breakups and cause families to embark on a vicious cycle of grief and diagnostic odyssey. Thirdly, the families struggle to ensure that these children remain invisible due largely to the lack of support and the fear of social isolation. This may explain why children with disabilities are often lost to follow-up. Mothers in India exemplified this situation as endless suffering and grief. In their words, disability is worse than death, and they showed preference for death over disability for these children. Fourthly, individually, the children are prone to rejection, neglect, physical, mental, and sexual abuse, as well as isolation and infanticide. A recent data from Kenya also showed that children with disabilities are more likely to die prematurely. To build inclusive ECD services, we must recognize that the world is now a global village. Beyond statistics and estimates, programs designed for this region should not be perceived as inferior or abandoned based on cost-effectiveness analysis. Thus, to promote trust, we should not reinvent the wheel, but rather adapt and modify successful best practices through pilot studies. Program rollout can then be graded based on affordability. The strategy for leaving no child behind should be based on priority early identification in line with UNICEF's mission for the most disadvantaged. This should be swiftly followed before the children disappear by family-centered early intervention opportunities. A multidisciplinary team of relevant professionals and professionals with disabilities where available should support each child in closing the gap to catch up with their normal peers wherever possible. Community engagement is critical for societal support and understanding, and the global community should be committed to leave no child behind. In a sentence, one thing that should galvanize and motivate our actions is to instill with empathy a sense of hope in parents of children with disabilities, in the possibility of a better future for these children by engaging with real-life champions with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm so grateful that the technology allowed us to hear from you. Thank you very much for your leadership. We're pleased now to welcome Dr. Phyllis McGrath, Advisory Board Chair of the Open Society Foundation's Early Childhood Program and Director of Georgetown University's Center for Child and Human Development. Please share with us what have been the effects of the COVID pandemic on the development of young children due to limited ECD services. What do governments need to do to mitigate the adverse effects on young children, particularly the most marginalized?
Thank you so much for including me in this very important launch. You all hearing an echo? Because I'm hearing a terrible echo.
Let's just, I think you're logged in twice. So if we could just mute on your second line, perhaps?
I have no idea where else I'm logged in.
We will fix, if you just wait just one moment, we can make sure to fix it. Sorry.
Well, thank you.
I believe.
Okay, you just
Yep.
removed it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you for your patience. Please go ahead.
Sorry about that. Again, thank you for including me in this very important launch, and congratulations. The effects of the pandemic, I know for everyone in this room, have been profound, and particularly profound for families with young children. The effects on the families of loss of income, stability, childcare, workplace environments have trickled down very dramatically to the children themselves. And for young children, a sense of safety and security and daily structure and routines is so paramount, and much of this has been lost in many families. Particularly alongside that is the continuity of care and the continuity of learning. And this is such a critical period for that and for social development. And when we think of children with disabilities, it's even more profound, because many of the services that are so important to their progress have not been available, have not been provided in home. The special accommodations that they need and special materials, and of course the compounded social isolation, which is even at the best has been difficult for many of these children. So that's the context. And I was very pleased to hear Dr. Brixey respond with what the World Bank has been doing. They've been a leader in thinking about this. Governments, both local and national, are critical to the solution. I'd also like to give a shout out to UNESCO and their Learning Cities, where I've learned a lot about how local governments have been very effective in creating the kinds of environments that need to be developed. And there are three areas that I would say that governments need to address. First is the area of keeping children healthy and nourished with emergency food deliveries, and as Dr. Brixey said, water, sanitation, hygiene. The second is keeping the young children learning, and the children with disabilities and other challenges learning. And that involves making sure that early childhood education is included in the distance learning plans of countries and communities, that there be in-home services available for young children with disabilities, and that there be in-person opportunities for those children who are at risk for violence and abuse. And I have, as I said, seen a number of cities develop very effective and creative strategies to this end. In addition to distributing materials and books, as we can't do it in person, we have the venues of the radio, television, et cetera, that need to be utilized. And then the third very important area for countries and communities to address is protecting young children from violence and abuse. And in order to do this, we need to provide support to the very stressed caregivers and parents around coping, around managing stress, and around parenting strategies in these complicated times. And lastly, be sure that we are training frontline workers to be able to identify and respond to the possibilities of violence and abuse in homes. So it's a big challenge. The pandemic has put a challenge out there for all of us, and it is only through our combined efforts, both at the community and at the state and at the national level, that we'll be able to really support young children and their families. Thank you again, Jennifer, for including me in this.
Thank you so much. Really insightful remarks that help guide us as we implement the findings from this report. We're grateful for your leadership. Welcome next to Sarah Gasarik, U.S. Government Special Advisor on Children in Adversity. Recent policy and strategy developments at USAID give us hope that inclusive ECD and inclusive early childhood education will receive more prioritization. As the U.S. Government Special Advisor on Children in Adversity, please tell us more about USAID's current work to scale up inclusive ECD, and how can others in this global community help?
Thank you, Jennifer, and congratulations to you and all the team on the launch of the new Leave No Child Behind report. We've read it, we've looked at it, it's great information. Thanks so much for including us in today's discussion. So I do have the privilege of leading the U.S. government's efforts to implement our most recent strategy for advancing protection and care for children in adversity. And the strategy builds on three evidence-based objectives. The first and the most relevant to today's discussion is to build strong beginnings. So the U.S. government is committed to promoting nurturing care for the most vulnerable newborns and young children by funding comprehensive and integrated programming in early childhood development to provide for children's health, nutrition, safety, and security, and responsive caregiving for social and emotional well-being, language development, and opportunities for early learning. The second objective is to put family first, because we all know a child thrives best when surrounded by consistent, nurturing, and protective family care. And finally, the third objective is to protect children from violence. So USAID funds a number of evidence-based parenting interventions to promote nurturing care for children. In Rwanda, USAID funds a family strengthening intervention where Rwanda's community-based child protection workforce conducts home visits to encourage parents to positively respond to and interact with their infants and young children. In Cambodia, we've just awarded $15 million to support an integrated program to promote early childhood development and nurturing care for all children. We have a particular focus on early identification of developmental delays, and so that in all of our efforts, we seek to ensure that most marginalized children are included. USAID also promotes health, nutrition, clean water, and sanitation, particularly for pregnant women and children under 5. Through these programs, health workers interact with parents and families, providing counseling and model behaviors on nurturing and responsive caregiving. Nurturing care is also a key component of our global flagship multi-sectoral nutrition program. Through this program, USAID developed responsive care and early learning counseling cards to be integrated into existing feeding counseling cards. And we're also supporting guidance for improving nutritional care for children with developmental disabilities. Through multiple strategies and initiatives, USAID promotes inclusive pre-primary education. And while it may not come across clearly in the US donor country profile, in recent years, USAID's pre-primary education budget has ranged from about $4 million to $24 million, and ECD investments continue to grow. USAID has commissioned a multi-country study on inclusive education in Cambodia, Nepal, Malawi, and all of this to identify and inform best practices. And we've also, our All Children Reading Grand Challenge for Development is launching a prize call in early 2021 to identify and support innovative educational tech solutions that improve literacy outcomes for pre-primary age children in low-resource countries. So to your second question, how do others in the global community help? We know that increasing the capacity of parents to nurture their children requires coordinated, multifaceted support, and we're grateful for the robust civil society engagement, not only in helping us to develop, as you all were a part of, the AFCA strategy, but also to implement and achieve our mutual goals. The U.S. government is also exploring ways we might better link our health, education, and child protection programming to ensure continuity of ECD support as children grow, and our implementing partners can really help us break down those silos as well. So overall, our goals are ambitious. However, with the expertise and bold commitment of our partners and civil society organizations, we know that our mandate for action is realistic and achievable. So thanks again, and back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you very much, Sarah. That's so helpful. And I'm glad you raised the issue that sometimes when a donor like USAID might be doing fantastic work in this area, but it's not yet showing up in OECD DAC. Which is so critical, and the researchers behind this report had to use that as the one universal way to be able to pull key information. So that takes us next to an expert in this area, our colleagues at UNICEF, and we'd love to hear from Henry specifically. We have a chance to speak with Henriette Ahrens, Deputy Director of the Program Division at UNICEF. And I know that she kindly is joining us while in the middle of multiple meetings today. We understand how busy it is. I just want to make sure that she's going to be able to come in. We'd like to hear from you directly about what steps are needed to develop a universal method across donors to better track spending on ECD.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm speaking from UNICEF Program Division, and definitely ECD and inclusive ECD is dear to our mandate. It's in the core of what we do and what we strive for. And so better tracking of the ECD spending by all donors would definitely also increase the visibility to this agenda and hopefully incentivize additional investment at country level. And UNICEF tries to lead by example in this regard. We've already heard this morning by another presenter that despite the shared understanding of the importance of early childhood development, less than 1% of international aid is dedicated to pre-primary education, and half of the world's preschool children are actually missing out on quality early childhood education. And in order to tackle this gap, UNICEF we set ourselves a bold ambition. This was launched with our education strategy, and we want to see at least 1 year of quality inclusive early childhood education for all children, including those in emergencies. What does that mean for the resourcing? And internally, we decided that at least 10% of our education budget has to go to ECE, to early childhood education. And we are now able to track that commitment and see it as one of our core priorities in the education sector. And we all know that currently there's not one universal method to track donor spending on early childhood development. And this is even true for early childhood education or preschool interventions. And if we really want to do this as a donor community or together with our donors, we need to agree on the core interventions that are included in that package of ECD. And we need to agree on a gradual approach, building on available data and which are the areas that are easier to track and need to be prioritized, and subsequently include more complex activities such as counseling of parents and screening for developmental delays of all children in the health sector, for example. So also we will need to track contributions of the key donors, and this is easier for the ones who have data publicly available, like OECD DAC, as well as some foundations have that. And we think that that might also be like an incremental approach, and more donors would volunteer to join over time. There is one methodology needed to make data comparable and to find the way to institutionalize the collection and reporting of these data sets, so that those can be shared among participating donors. UNICEF is actually also very interested in tracking methods of ECD spending at national level. And so we are also looking into working with governments, and we do quite a lot of work in this area to identify how much they are spending on ECD and identifying the core activities that are within the different sectors that form part of that ECD agenda. And that has actually led to the raising of the awareness of the importance of that investment at national level, and to strengthening the multi-sectoral approach that is needed. And so we would also like to see of how that can be dovetailed with the donor investment on the one side, also looking at into national budgets. UNICEF has launched a global resource guide on public finance for early childhood development. And this is with examples of how this can be done at country level and different types of methodology to track public finance. And the influencing of the public finance and the showing of investments and return for investments in early childhood development is one of the policy and advocacy priorities for UNICEF. Also, in this regard, we would be happy to expand our collaboration with other partners in these two approaches, on the donor tracking as well as on the financing of ECD at country level. Over from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comprehensive insights, and we really look forward to working together to make this a reality. Welcome next to Kristen McConnell, who leads early childhood care and education at the Global Partnership for Education, or GPE. What is GPE planning to do to advance inclusive early childhood education and inclusive education in the next 5-year strategic plan that GPE is developing through 2025?
Great, thank you, Jennifer. And congratulations to Jennifer, Tom, Nafisa, and the whole team for putting together a great event today, as well as a wonderful report. It's really great to be a part of this distinguished panel today. Also, I assume most people are familiar with GPE, but I'll start with a brief introduction that GPE is a multi-stakeholder partnership that mobilizes partners and funds to help 76 partner countries transform education systems and deliver quality learning. We focus on children marginalized by poverty, gender, disability, and displacement. In terms of early learning and inclusion, we've seen significant progress across our partner countries in developing national policies on education for children with disabilities. We've also seen more GPE grants support early childhood education over the past 2 years, and we've had a strategic focus on increasing planning for the early childhood subsector under the BELDS initiative. Both of these are trends we intend to pursue in GPE's new 2020 to 2025 strategy. For those of you who are familiar with GPE, you'll notice that many aspects of our current strategy will continue to be reflected in our new strategy. For example, we'll have a continued focus on the early years for the most vulnerable populations. The GPE board took a decision on the new scope of the strategy, which will focus on 12 years of education plus at least 1 year of pre-primary education. This shows a continued focus on incentivizing countries to invest in quality early childhood education. We'll also see that equity and inclusion remain priority areas within GPE 2025. For example, GPE will continue to offer results-based financing to countries where a part of the grant is conditional on reaching goals related to equity and inclusion. Not surprisingly, we'll maintain a country-driven approach. We know that a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work. So GPE closely works with countries to identify the bottlenecks in their respective contexts and to support and incentivize transformative reforms. And then within that country-driven approach, we'll continue to ensure that education planning and policy processes are inclusive of key stakeholders working in these areas. We will continue to support representation in local education groups by disabled persons organizations and other civil society organizations working on behalf of marginalized groups, as well as ECD organizations working across multiple sectors. And then there are also some exciting changes in the new strategy that have the potential to really advance inclusive education, including early childhood education over the next 5 years. For example, you'll see there's a stronger focus on identifying key barriers for achieving inclusive education for young children. GPE's new strategy will support tools and initiatives that provide countries with context-specific data, evidence, and learning on barriers that keep children out of school and policies that can help address them. We also will really focus on building countries' capacity for inclusive education planning. There will be flexible funding available throughout the policy cycle to build capacity needs, and there will be a requirement for partner countries to make progress on better data for children with disabilities. There will also be stronger linkages between the new KICs and education out loud mechanisms and GPE's operating model. But nevertheless, we know that there's more work to do. As a partnership, we'll continue to advocate for increased investments in inclusive early childhood education. And we'll continue to support our partner countries who want to invest in their early years to increase that investment. And then in light of COVID's impact on education, we know that there's more work to do together. Early childhood education and inclusive education are firmly embedded in our new strategic plan, And a successful replenishment of GPE can help us all reach our ambitions to give every child their best start in life. Thank you.
Really well said, Kristen. Thank you for your leadership on this. And this is a call to action to all of us. At country level, the local education groups or LEGs, if they prioritize these key issues, that will help unlock that type of partnership with GPE to make sure that inclusive early childhood education is a much stronger portion of those funds. So let's keep working together to make that a reality. Thank you. Next, we're pleased to introduce Henriette Geiger, Director for People and Peace in the Directorate General for International Cooperation and Development with the European Commission. How will the EU support an increased investment for early childhood education and pre-primary in the EU programming process, especially in partner countries on the African continent? What is the EU doing to ensure that any investment in and programming for education, including ECD, is disability inclusive and in line with the CRPD, to which the EU and all EU member states are signatories?
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you for your excellent report. It powerfully drives the point home that we collectively failed to sufficiently invest in early childhood development. And despite the fact that we all know that investment in early childhood development and early education give high returns, especially for the most marginalized children, and that these programs are worth every penny invested. We must collectively promote them because we feel that they are amongst the most powerful education investments to improve learning, and they have been demonstrated as being very powerful as an equalizing factor. This is very important. I would like to recall the European Commission's policies on increased attention to ECD. In our consensus for development, it states that the EU and its member states will support inclusive, lifelong learning and equitable quality education, particularly during early childhood and primary years. Also, our future planned strategies, such as the European Disability Strategy coming next year and the EU Child Rights Strategy, will give stronger focus on equality, leaving no one behind, and they will pay attention to intersecting forms of discriminations, such as disability and gender, in the European Commission's response. Our commitment to education will continue unabated and will support early learning as a crucial area to show that education is and will remain at the heart of EU's investment in development. Our Commissioner Urpi Lainen has decided to increase the EU financial assistance to education in partner countries from 7 to 10% of our overall cooperation portfolio. Our Commissioner is a former teacher, so we have in her a very strong advocate for human development, and she is deeply committed to education. Now, how do we translate these policies and this commitment into the programming of the next 7 years, the next financial programming cycle? This is a dynamic process with several built-in steps. First comes the dialogue with our partner countries to rethink and reform education systems to meet the needs of every child. And there it's very important to listen to the countries and to see where do they stand and what do they want. We must focus on evidence-based innovative solutions that support teachers to meet all their students' needs and abilities, including ECD. Why am I emphasizing ownership so much? Because without ownership, of the national systems will never be able to pick up once the donors have left. So the partner countries need to be convinced that early childhood development is what is getting them the fastest, the furthest. Only like that we can have the sustainability over time. The second step that we do is we consult with the CSO community in our partner countries. They are integral part of this process of ownership, and once decided, they have to monitor and watch the government's commitments and implementation. And thirdly, then, our project formulation is guided by the human rights-based approach. So we very much take care that the rights-based approach is mainstreamed in all our programming process. Now, we also work very closely with our colleagues on nutrition and food security. I haven't heard that yet, but as a stunted child has very limited possibilities for education, even early education comes too late. We have to start much earlier, and COVID and the dramatic increase in poverty and hunger have further exacerbated this situation. And for me, the many millions of stunted children in the world are first a symbol for our collective shame and our collective failure in countries, even middle-income countries, where you have millions of stunted children that have no chance to have good chances in life, is really something that needs to be tackled together with early childhood education. Now, regarding what we do to help our people in the field, we in the headquarters provide guidance, advice, and practical support to our staff in the delegations. Our development cooperation is decentralized, but we don't have education experts in all the countries. So we are producing materials on early childhood development, the integration of the rights of persons with disability, and the implementation of the CRPD. So we have recently produced practical guidance notes on early childhood education, which will help our experts in the field to invest more and better in early childhood education and early childhood development. So we have that possibility over the next 7 years, and I will fight to get it right. You have my commitment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Global applause for that commitment. We really appreciate it. And let us know how we can all be helpful in collaborating to make this work. Thank you so much. Welcome next to Dr. Lynette Okengo, Executive Director of the Africa Early Childhood Network. What must be done to enhance the work of governments, parents, and teachers in African countries to provide the best possible environment for children to reach their developmental potential, especially children with disabilities and from marginalized groups?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and a very big congratulations to the entire team for the launch of this timely report. In response to your question, I will focus on 2 issues. Firstly, governments, teachers, and parents need to be convinced about the critical role that investing in the early years plays in social, economic, and political stability of nations for all children. All children, not only those who are easy to work with or easy to reach, or those whose parents can afford services, but all children. Without this understanding and commitment, we will have policy gaps, or policies that are not implemented, low demand for quality services, programs that are not well resourced, inequitable access, and many children continuing to remain invisible. And these are just a few, to mention just a few. So what is needed? Targeted and sustained advocacy at all levels. But this must be powered by a very solid grassroots demand and support. Secondly, indeed, as Christine mentioned, one size does not fit all. Governments certainly need evidence that is contextually relevant to support policy development, program design, implementation, and continuous improvement. Not everything works everywhere. There's need for good quality data to guide decision-making. Governments need data for planning and allocation of financial, human, and physical resources in order to ensure equity, reduced wastage, and duplication. Most importantly, governments need data to be able to prepare long-term financial strategies aimed at increasing domestic financing. Program planners need data to know what is working and what is not working. They need good models, examples of good models that can be implemented at scale. Teachers need data to design appropriate learning programs suited to children under their care. Parents also need data to know what action to take in supporting their children to succeed in life, regardless of their abilities. So the second point, what I think is needed is good quality data, contextually relevant evidence on what works. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm delighted to be part of this.
Thank you. That's so critical. And thank you for your important framing and call to action. Now we will hear from Beatriz Felisberto, a youth advocate in Mozambique, and her mother, Joanna Tembe, about the advantage ECD plays in the lives of children with disabilities. Joanna and Beatriz, how has inclusive early childhood support helped you? And their colleague will in person be able to share information in English, but as a quick reminder, you can also, I believe, be able to see different interpretation options via Zoom, and we will make sure to share full remarks. Thank you. Over to you, Joanna, Beatriz, and Delfina.
Olá, me chamo Beatriz, tenho 17 anos e a RPC me ajudou muito. Me ajudou a conseguir escrever, pois eu já consigo. Como eu conheci a RPC, um dia eu estava largada da escola. Uma ativista estava no caminho. Daí, essa ativista me perguntou, seu nome é quem? Eu falei, Beatriz. Beatriz, vive aonde? Depois, eu falei onde eu vivo. Ela me acompanhou na minha casa. E daí, ela conversou com a minha mãe e disse assim para minha mãe. Falou assim para minha mãe. Falou, nós trabalhamos com pessoas com deficiência. Queremos saber que se a mãe aceita que a sua filha também fosse ser feito exercícios físicos, né? Exercícios. E daí, minha mãe aceitou, graças a Deus. E eles me ajudaram. Hoje eu já consigo escrever. Eles pegaram na caneta e rolaram um pano e estão me ajudando muito mesmo. E hoje o meu sonho é ser uma jornalista. Obrigada.
Boa tarde, eu sou a mãe da Beatriz. A Beatriz adquiriu a deficiência no parto. O parto dela foi complicado, né? mas eu não descobri que no parto ela adquiriu a deficiência. E eu só comecei a ver a criança a demorar a sentar. Ele ficou até 8 meses sem sentar. Então, eu fui ao hospital pedir ajuda médica. Então, o que eles fizeram me recomendaram para fazer fisioterapia. Aí eu comecei a fazer fisioterapia e quando ela tinha 3 anos, começou a sentar. Daí eu abandonei a fisioterapia no hospital, comecei a fazer sozinha em casa, porque eu já tinha aquelas noções. E mais tarde ela começou a andar. Mas eu sempre ia para o hospital e lá recebia palestras sobre nutrição, qual é a boa alimentação para dar à criança. A criança com deficiência tinha que comer muita fruta, coisas assim saudáveis. Então, eu seguia todas aquelas recomendações. Hoje, minha filha já conseguiu andar, já vai à escola, e eu, graças a Deus, agradeço por isso. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much. This is really powerful to hear more about how critical these investments are for Beatrice and for all children around the world. Next, we're going to go to our colleagues who will help to kick off this series. Today just starts the process of the country launches and a deeper dive where we can delve more into discussing the case studies with this report in 4 key countries. So now we will learn about the country launches, starting with Zacharias Sakai, the country director of Light for the World in Mozambique.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. It's really a pleasure to be in this global launch of the report. For Mozambique, we have planned to launch the country-specific report on the 27th November 2020, and we expect to have all key players in the ECD in Mozambique, including government officials from Minister of Education, Minister of Health, and the Minister of Gender, Child and Social Action. And also we expect to involve the DPOs to be part of the launch and the movement of education for all. All of us will be together to make this launch of this very important report. And we do expect that from this report, the government will improve or increase the investment and implementation of a very comprehensive and inclusive holistic ECD plan in Mozambique. Because currently there's a lot of challenges has been pointed out in the report. And we hope that together with the government and different players, we can really define a different pathway for the future in ECD in Mozambique. So I don't want to take more minutes on this, and I just want to say thank you and congratulations for this global launch. And I give the floor to my teammates, my colleague from Burkina Faso. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Je m'appelle Oulé Christophe. Je suis le président de l'Union nationale des associations burkinabè pour la promotion des aveugles, UNABEPAM du Burkina Faso. J'ai à mes côtés le ministère de l'Éducation nationale, représenté par la directrice de la promotion de l'éducation inclusive, de l'éducation des filles et du genre, Madame Rasmata Ouedraogo. J'ai le plaisir de vous informer que le rapport sur le Burkina Faso sera lancé le 26 novembre de 14h à 15h30 temps universel. Nous osons espérer qu'avec ce lancement, le gouvernement du Burkina Faso, accompagné par les partenaires techniques et financiers, va s'engager résolument dans les années à venir pour un programme d'éducation parentale, de dépistage précoce et d'intervention sur les enfants de 0 à 5 ans. Donc, je vous invite à participer à ce lancement et nous comptons sur vos appuis et sur vos contributions. Merci beaucoup et bravo pour le lancement officiel. Voilà, merci à tous.
Thank you. And next we go to our colleague in Zimbabwe. I'm so sorry. Next we go to Zambia directly. George Hamasungo, Executive Director of the National Education Coalition, or ZANIC. Please come in if you're on the line.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, special greetings to you all from Lusaka. My name is George Hamsunga, Executive Director for Zambia National Education Coalition, ZANIC. ZANIC is a coalition of civil society organizations promoting quality and inclusive education for all through research, advocacy, and capacity building. ZANIC is also a proud member of the Global Campaign for Education. First and foremost, I'd like to underscore our sincere gratitude and appreciation for the opportunity given to us to participate in this important event. As ZANIC, we also wish to announce to you that Zambia will hold its Leave No One Behind National Report launch on 25th November 2020 at 3 p.m. local time. And during our national launch, the big question that we'll be asking is, why is it that we have clear education donor commitments and priorities at global level that are not replicated at national level? I thank you all, and now you can hear from Zimbabwe.
Thank you, George. Greetings from Harare, Zimbabwe. My name is Deborah Tigere. I'm the Country Director for Christian Blind Mission, CBM in Zimbabwe, a disability inclusive development organization. And congratulations for the launch of this wonderful report. Please join us tomorrow, the 20th of November, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central African time for the Zimbabwe launch. Our focus is comprehensive, cross-sectoral and multi-stakeholder engagement is key in promoting early childhood development. The benefits of early childhood programs are not just short-term in nature. Economically speaking, early childhood programs are a good investment. Now, the government of Zimbabwe has long supported increasing educational opportunity for children, including the youngest, with support from partners. They have also published articles and convened community forums on early childhood issues, especially in schools with high proportions of disadvantaged children. It is also evident that ECD is underfunded. However, this issue is not just unique to Zimbabwe. Now we call upon the government of Zimbabwe to build partnerships and synergies to ensure that no child is left behind in the early years of development. Thank you. And now back to Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you very much to today's speakers and everyone who has contributed to this report. It's clear that this is just the beginning of our discussion and our advocacy and work together. I would especially like to thank everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this collaborative global event possible. And we're so grateful to our colleagues at ECDAN for hosting this webinar today, and to all of the contributors who helped to support this event. In closing, we invite you to join a three-part call to action. First, we are looking forward to all 4 country launches that were just mentioned and hope to see you there. Please join and help spread the word. Second, please provide your feedback on today's event at the link that we have shared in the chat box. The feedback form is in all 3 languages. We want to hear from you. What did you like? What can be improved for next time and for future work together? And what next steps would you like to take in support of inclusive early childhood development? We set it up so that this is anonymous, but if you would like to put your contact information there to be invited to a follow-up event that we'll be holding in early December, led by Dr. Tom Sabella and the Inclusive Education Early Childhood Community of Practice, please do give us your contact information, and we would love to work together to make the recommendations from this report a reality. Finally, please join our partners, Global Citizen, in signing and sharing the petition in collaboration with this report. The link is in the chat box. Together, we have already reached over 30,000 signatures for this petition. Please send it today to at least 10 people in your network and ask them to sign as well. If we can get it up to 50,000 people signed, then Global Citizen is looking at ways to feature it in one of their future global events with celebrities to help really raise higher profile for the issue. For many of you who have already joined the poll in progress, thank you. Please continue to give us your feedback. We can see, and we'll quickly end the poll now so that everybody can see the results, that increasing investment by far is the one item that people selected the most. But we know that all of these recommendations are so vital, and it's critical that each one of us take actions today to make it a reality for children around the world. Tomorrow is Universal Children's Day, and by participating today, you all have helped us really jumpstart those actions needed for tomorrow, for today, and every day. Thank you all for joining us today and for your collaboration, your advocacy, your partnership to truly leave no child behind.